In general, to get better results, it's better to ask things step by step instead of all at once, and it's also better to expect small results which you can then use again as input for the next prompt, instead of hoping that Copilot will immediately generate a bunch of classes that are exactly what you want from one prompt. That is not to say that the results from asking something once and then expecting a bunch of classes together are bad per se. On the contrary, they get better and better all the time, while the underlying GPT and prompt library techniques improve. In the previous few demos, you've actually seen this at work already. Nevertheless, it is still better to work step by step. Let's see how that works. For this demo, I'm going to open Copilot Chat. That's still the thread from the previous demo here. I don't want it anymore. I'm going to start a new thread. There we go. Now, what I'm going to do here can also be achieved with the inline approach, but I just want to show you the different ways of interacting with Copilot. Personally though, for the step-by-step approach, I tend to prefer using Copilot Chat. It feels more natural to me to view the step-by-step approach as a conversation between Copilot and myself. Anyway, say that we want Copilot to write us some code that maps between a product and a product DTO class. We could ask for that in one go. Something along the lines of 1. Create a product class with product details, create a product DTO class, and write mapping code. For example, write mapping code to map the product to product DTO. And let's be specific about how we want this mapping to happen by using link projections. Alright, let's send this. Alright, let's see what we've got. A product DTO class was generated with a product ID, product name, and product price. And we get an example even, in which a list of products is newed up. And then the mapping indeed happens with link projections. So, this is pretty good, right? Well, it is what we asked, but maybe we don't need a name property on the product, but a title property. And maybe we want an additional description property on that product. Maybe we want it to have a date. And maybe we don't want to map all properties from the product class to the property DTO class. If we do this step by step, we have more control and can provide more context to Copilot by adjusting the outcomes in between. Let's give that a try. So I'm going to start a new thread here. I don't want this to interfere with each other. And I'm going to start it by asking to create a product class with product details. And here we have our product class with an ID, a name, a price, and a description. Maybe this is okay, but I'm not completely happy with it yet. I need an additional property, a category. So let's ask Copilot to add that category. And there we go, the category property has been added. Now, if we ask Copilot to create that product DTO class, it should know that the product class has a category property and it can take that into account, because whatever happened before in this conversation is also part of the context that is used to create the prompt and the eventual outcome. So let me ask, create a product DTO class. And as you can see, the category property is there as well. It got that from the context. I'm still not completely happy with this though. This is a DTO, a data transfer object, and I typically don't need all the properties that I have in my product class to be in my product DTO class. Data transfer objects often don't contain everything the underlying class contains, as they are sent over the wire, and one of the things to use them is thus to keep what's being sent over the wire small, or catered to whatever consumes the potential endpoint that requests the DTOs. Something that is not uncommon to do would be to leave out the description. So let's ask Copilot to do that. And there we go. No more description property in my product DTO class. That's better. Alright, let's finish the task by asking the last question, which is writing that mapping code. So write mapping code to map the product to product DTO, again using link projections. And there we go. We got an example list of products, and then we got code that selects a new product DTO from that list of products with ID, name, price, and category. So no description here because product DTO doesn't have a description anymore, and it stores that in a list of product DTOs. So there we go. By going through the process step by step, we were able to make adjustments along the way and thus provide additional context to Copilot. Copilot learns from each prompt. Now, it may not always be necessary to split up your conversation with Copilot in various steps, but it does often help. The next best practice is about providing context. Writing questions for Copilot or chatting with it, well, as you know by now, that's just one type of input that goes into a prompt. To increase the likelihood of getting good results, it's a good idea to provide context in other ways as well. We touched upon this already. The neighboring tabs approach is a very good example of that. We've got a person class here. It still contains some code from one of the previous demos. But what it doesn't contain is a birth date property. So let me add that. I'm going to get rid of that constructor here. I don't need that for this demo. Now let's say I'm actually good with only the date of birth. Why not? Now let's add a date time offset that is allowed to have null as value. Let's name it birth date. I can still type that. You don't need Copilot for everything. All right, there we go. Let's close this so the tab is no longer open and cannot serve as context anymore. And now let's say I want to create an extension method. The extension method should calculate the age from the date of birth. So let's add a comment in which I ask exactly that. Create an extension method on type person that calculates the age from the date of birth. And there we go. That looks kinda good, right? The thing is though, Copilot is just guessing here. We don't have a property named date of birth. We named our property birth date. And also, our type is date time offset, while this method seems to assume that the type of date of birth is a date time and not a date time offset. This is a good guess though, and date of birth is probably better naming than birth date for a property that holds the date of birth of a person. But nevertheless, this is still just a guess. So I'm not going to accept that. Now let me open the person file in our IDE here. And let's ask this again. And there we go. This is a much better suggestion. The property now has the correct name, birth date. And that is something that Copilot learned from the neighboring tab that is open. It also learned that the birth date property is of type date time offset. As you can see, it's now looking at the value property of birth date, which, if birth date is a date time offset, is where the actual date time is stored in. It was even smart enough to first check if birth date is null. So that's pretty cool, and we got all of that by providing a bit of context. So that's how this works in line via the neighboring tabs approach. But when you use Ask Copilot or the Copilot chat window, you can also refer to files with the hashtag symbol. Let's give that a try. So I'm going to copy this question here. Let's remove it. I'm also going to close the person class. This time let's use Copilot chat and ask the same question. And I'm going to refer to the person class as well. And there we go. Here too, the correct property name and type are taken into account. The nice thing with this approach is that directly from here we can choose to insert this in a new file. And then we get this person extensions file here, which contains our extension method. So we also get file name suggestions out of the box. I could also try and refer to the full solution, which will make Copilot look for the person class and should yield the same results, or at least likewise results. And there we go. As you can see, that is indeed the case. Now, if you have a large solution with many files in it, this may not be the best approach, as Copilot still has to choose which parts of the solution are fed into the prompt, but in our case, this works just fine. That's it for this best practice. On to the next one.